my mic is on. Can you hear me? Yes, good. So thank you, Paul, and thank you, Catherine. Thank you to all the board members of the Humanities Center. Thank you to Scott Beatty, you're here, for all your work in bringing me out here. I'm very excited to be here, and there's also a community conversation that's happening tomorrow, and I hope to see at least some of you there. I also want to recognize Jeff Spolstra and Professor Harold Glasser of the Sustainability Office of Sustainability, and I want to send a respectful shout out to Professor Ken Dahlberg, retired from Western Michigan, a longtime friend and a guru to me, and I cherish I met him in 1996, I believe, at the Ag and Human Values Conference, and I cherish the relationship I've had with him since then. I also want to send out a shout out. We have 3 students from Wayne State. Slava Pallas, a candidate in anthropology. She'll graduate with an MA in anthropology at the end of this semester. And she's been accepted in the PhD program at Wayne State as well. Adam Pruitt, who's our senior. Oh, good. He has friends here. He's a senior in biology. And also want to shout out to Tyler Shelton, who's a candidate of the Master of Urban Planning program at Wayne State. He is your son as well. He counts Western Michigan as his alma mater as well, or alma mater since he's not graduated yet from Wayne State. And just quickly, Slava is the leader at our farmers market, the Wayne State Farmers Market, for the SNAP operations, the food stamp operations, and she also helps out with research related to food systems, helps me out, as well as professors in the anthropology department, especially some great work coming out of anthropology, Professor Andy Newman and Yusan Zhang. Adam Pruitt is the leader of the Warrior Garden. He led the garden last year, and this year he's coming on board as staff, and Tyler volunteered at least for 2 years with the Student Advantage program at the farmers market, and also was on the campus the President's Standing Committee on Environmental Initiatives. He was a member of that committee. So, and a quick shout out to Rachel Baer. You are in my presentation, so I won't say any more than that. We are talking about some big ideas and big issues in our national conversation these days, especially with the campaigning that's going on. Issues such as immigration and terrorism and trade and higher education and healthcare and jobs, and ideas about who should become the next Supreme Court justice and when. There are other big issues that are coming to our attention in amazing ways and inspiring ways, such as, for example, the Black Lives Matter, and also the impact of the exodus from the Middle East, especially Syria, that's affecting Europe, not so much us, and so it's not as much on our radar. Also not on our radar are some big issues such as climate change, energy, agriculture, and the food system, and its health and ecological impacts. But they are big issues too, but I won't talk about big issues, ideas, and goals, and big plans tonight. In fact, and this is the bottom line of my presentation today, is that big ideas matter in our work, and we're grappling with what the definition and meaning are of such big ideas as community food security, food justice, sustainability, and sovereignty. They inspire us, they help us reimagine a different set of social arrangements and connections to the natural environment. Scott is okay, going to worry about that. I can speak louder too, I can project, I'm a professor. Is that good? Okay, excellent. And these big ideas help us reimagine a different set of social arrangements and connections to the natural environment for us as ordinary people, especially those who in different ways have been excluded, exploited, and oppressed. Such big ideas are often associated with social movements that guide actions on the ground and bring new people, young people especially, and energy and creativity and resources to the movements with which they're associated. As I said before, I'm not going to talk about them. They've seen much scholarship on their meaning and implications and contradictions. As a practitioner of community food system work, I'm equally interested, if not more often, interested in how these big ideas are contextualized, translated, and enacted on the ground, and how groups grapple with the tensions that emerge as they move between ideas and of food sustainability, justice, and sovereignty, and so on, and actions, and draw lessons and then reincorporate those lessons. So for example, what does food justice mean for us here and now in Detroit? What does it mean to create sustainable food systems for us as students and faculty at Wayne State University, a public university in inner city Detroit that has been struggling with the same forces that have afflicted the city and the state, but also one with, at best, a mixed record in terms of its relationship to the larger community, even when times are good. So, times are bad now, and that's a good excuse. Not that the university is not engaged with the community, and we'll talk about that. But community, I'm interested in how, in developing these actions, communities of commitment are formed for a new set of values and local practices. So community is outcome. Second, community is also a tool and a resource and a pre-existing infrastructure with which to reimagine and realize sustainable food systems. In Detroit, for example, communities of place are organized by neighborhood. You have East Side and West Side, by purpose to provide food assistance or nutrition assistance to impoverished households, by shared identity and struggles, such as, for example, those who were involved in the civil rights movements or the Black nationalist movement or the anti-police brutality struggles. These communities draw on their history, their sense of the local needs, their goals, capacity, and their pre-existing repertoire of strategies to create activities around food. In so doing, they enlist new members. Community is an important resource and tool with which to engage in this national movement around community food security, sustainability, and justice. So the everyday actions and repertoires help create brave actions, and you see this in Detroit, protests against evictions, protests against water shutoffs, and actions to develop food security policy, and so on. So it's in these little, small, local, concrete actions where I believe that community is imagined, created, where it resides and thrives, and also where possibilities for a better food system are imagined and created. In my own work, I draw on theories of social movements, community organizing, community and institutional change, right to the city, and regime analysis, just to name a few. But neither food justice nor community building is purely about theory. It's in the constant moving between theory and practice that I think where the interesting lessons are. So in my presentation today, I'll focus in the concrete ways in which groups, isn't that a great picture? It's from Chicago, by the way. I wish I could take credit for it. So I'll talk about groups that are working in Detroit, including my own group, Seed Wayne, talk about and implement the big ideas and the specific ways in which various groups build alternative food systems and the communities that are created in the process. Here's a quick outline of my talk. I'll provide a brief overview of the context in which we're working in Detroit and some food systems related developments and provide a historical overview of the growth of urban agriculture and some key issues, and focus especially on the work of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network and Keep Growing Detroit, in addition to my own program, Seed Wayne. I just want to say with Seed Wayne, the discussion, I'm not offering Seed Wayne as something of a best practice or a model. And in fact, as the students will tell you, we face many challenges ourselves, but it's important to share the lessons. It's important for me to share our lessons with you and also take back your lessons from campus and in the community. So I want to make sure I mention that caveat. So many of these findings should be familiar to this audience. The 2010 census put Detroit's population at just over 713,000 people, less than half the figure of its heyday more than 6 decades ago. 2014 estimates are at just over 680,000 people, so we're continuing to lose population. 4 out of 5 residents are African American. The city suffers from a 40% unemployment rate, 36% poverty rate, and about a third of the households are said to be food insecure as defined by the USDA. More than a third of adults are obese, and in 2009, the Center for Disease Control survey found that 1 out of 5 kids and youth are obese. Diabetes and cardiovascular disease rates are more than twice those of the rest of the US population. The city's Economic Development Agency lists 77 full-line groceries in the city of Detroit, and I'm somewhat skeptical about that number because I don't think it's as large as that, but the point I want to make is that none of them are African American owned, and that is actually a loss from 6 years ago where we had 2 African American owned grocery stores. We have Whole Foods opened a store in Midtown Detroit, and 2 Myers also opened, one at Woodward and 8 Mile and the other in Northwest Detroit on Grand River. About half of all residential properties are vacant or abandoned. That's about 20 square miles in Detroit, not counting parks and roads and rights of way. The subprime mortgage crisis of 2008 hit the city very hard. The city's land bank after that got tens of thousands of parcels, additional parcels into its stewardship. And now it holds more than 90,000 vacant parcels. And I'm talking about vacant parcels. There are additional tens of thousands of parcels that have derelict and vacant properties. I just want to also mention that in a context where urban growers have been struggling to get access to land, small numbers of parcels here and there, the city essentially disposed of 1,500 parcels on the east side to John Hans, an insurance billionaire. And so I'll put that out there. Several recent developments in politics and the political climate. The city adopted a new charter that reshaped the electoral landscape from at-large city council elections to district-based city council elections, which is very important for neighborhood-based accountability. Also, after 40 years, the city elected a white mayor, Mike Duggan. The city declared bankruptcy in 2013 and also emerged from it about 16 months later to address the $18 billion or so debt that the city incurred in a grand bargain that was struck that allows the city to slash nearly $7 billion in liabilities and free up $1.4 billion over 10 years to clear derelict buildings, restructure city government, and provide services. In addition, now there's a shrinkage-oriented planning process that was funded by major foundations that created a Detroit Future City framework that tries to rationalize city infrastructure, services, and settlement patterns based on neighborhoods of varying viability. Broader context. Okay, very quick food system highlights. I have some very interesting images as well, but I want you to see this list of topics so it is memorable. Urban agriculture has grown both in terms of the activities, but has also evolved in terms of scope and the types of activities in very sophisticated ways. Urban agriculture was facilitated in the 1970s by then Mayor Coleman Young, who created the Farm-A-Lot program as neighborhoods were being emptied out of people. But it really took off in the 1990s with federal funding from the Community Food Projects program and also a lot of sweat equity and foundation support. A network of growers through the Garden Resource Collaborative, which is a program of Keep Growing Detroit, counts more than 1,500 gardens, including scores of community gardens, 100 market gardens, and 80 school gardens. The network provides resources, education, planning, advocacy for the group as a whole, but also organizes gardeners in smaller networks around bringing shared labor and tool sharing and celebration. So this is an important creation of community around urban agriculture. There are also other food-related organizations that have farms, notably D-Town Farm, which is a program of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, and Earthworks Farm of the Capuchin Soup Kitchen, and I'll show you the images. And then there are other farms and community gardens that are hubs for neighborhoods, such as the Georgia Street Garden, the Brightmoor Garden, and the Freedom Garden. And gardens and farms are sponsored by a variety of entities, corporations, K through 12 schools, which I mentioned, neighborhood organizations, universities, and others. There's an enormous growth in activities which started from just simply teaching people how to grow a tomato to beekeeping and season extension with low tunnels and high tunnels, and gardening for market and preservation and seed saving, and so on. In 2008, the Detroit Food Policy, Detroit Black Community Food Security Network spearheaded the creation of the Detroit Food Security Policy that was adopted by City Council through resolution that paved the way for Detroit Food Policy Council in 2009. I count myself among its founding members. In 2013, the city adopted an urban agriculture ordinance, which very importantly legitimizes urban agriculture and has a very permissible approach to agriculture, to growing and selling food in a variety of land use categories. Of course, those of us who work with zoning and ordinances know that just legitimizing a use doesn't necessarily make anything happen, right? Gardens need resources and effort and other kinds of support, water. They don't just sprout on their own because someone allowed them to happen, right? It's important. And I talked about the closures of African-American-owned stores. In 2010, the Save-A-Lot closed on the east side, and in 2014, the Metro Foodland closed on Grand River. And of course, I talked about also Whole Foods opening. It got $5.8 million in state and local grants and tax credits, by far the largest that any food-related entity got from the government, food retail. And it's doing very well. It's among the highest grossing stores in the chain. And so, it's opened in Midtown. Okay, here are, this is Transplant Collection Day in spring. It's coming up in April, organized by Keep Growing Detroit. Crowds of gardeners descend upon, and it's a huge celebration of the season, the start of the season. People are greeting each other and hugging and arguing about plants and selecting plants, and it's an amazing event that happens a couple of days in April. So I talked about how the Garden Resource Program created this constellation of networks that provides resources, education, planning, leadership, organizing, and advocacy. Their market garden includes about 100 growers that last year earned $80,000 in revenues, which is significant given how it's organized. It's a cooperative of gardeners. But in terms of the key theme of this presentation, their big idea or goal is creating a food sovereign Detroit where a majority of fruits and vegetables consumed are grown in the city. So they're building on a study that was conducted by Michigan State University scholars Catherine Colasanti and Mike Ham that showed that Detroit growers could supply between 31% and 76% of vegetables and 17% and 42% of fruits that are currently consumed by Detroiters. And the range really depends on the type of production and storage methods used. And that they figured that would be that would be less than half of city-owned land. Now, given how much more land has come into tax foreclosure, it would be less than a third of city-owned land. So the next big step for us in Detroit to support urban agriculture is land. And the ambivalence of the ambivalence of among Detroit's elected officials around urban agriculture and land disposition is by now well known to us in Detroit, if not outside. Even in the face of ever increasing amount of vacancy and loss of population, many hold out for development as the highest and best use of land. They see agriculture as only an interim use of land. And in some cases, I think this is a minority, they see urban agriculture as somehow inimical to development or preemptive of development. In other words, oh my God, there's a farm there, don't develop there. You know, that's the reaction that they put out. So in response to that message and signals, the ag community in Detroit, and particularly Keep Growing Detroit, is seeking to frame urban agriculture as a vital part of urban neighborhoods. They are offering an image, a vision of community, of a neighborhood. They're talking about the value that it creates in nutrition, in physical activity, in safety, in sociability, and in fact, even in property values. And they're also trying to allay this fear among some people that farmers want all the vacant land there is in Detroit. And they're essentially saying, no, to achieve a food sovereign Detroit, we need about 5,000 acres, which is less than a third of city-owned land right now. So thus, they're helping reimagine neighborhoods as better neighborhoods with the integration of urban agriculture, and that it is possible to create these neighborhoods with the plan with the vision that they're putting forth. Now, we don't have if let's say tomorrow the city gave us 5,000 acres, we don't have the capacity to cultivate that. So we're a ways from achieving that vision. But the ideas are important, and the work, the steady work towards that is important. D-Town Farms, jump there. D-Town Farm is a 7-acre farm on Rouge Park, and it's a program of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. This organization places food justice in the context of broader struggles for racial justice, and particularly makes the case that, in very concrete terms, that the food system needs to serve African American communities and other communities of color with dignity and respect when members of the community interact as workers or as consumers, and also that the community needs to gain greater ownership of the food system and that it should create wealth for the African American community. They are critical, of course, of the mainstream industrial food system, but they're also critical of white-led alternatives to the mainstream system, and they call on fellow African American members to take on leadership roles in food system work, and invite white people and others with anti-racist commitments to join as allies. They offer a variety of other activities related to food system leadership, education, internship. They have the Youth Warriors education program. They offer a farm stand and food co-op, cooperative buying, and they are now developing People's Food Co-op in Detroit. That's actually in the works in terms of site acquisition. The Earthworks Urban Farm is a program of the Capuchin Soup Kitchen that came into food justice through emergency food assistance at its parent organization, the Capuchin Soup Kitchen, which is, and by the way, Earthworks Urban Farm is the only certified organic farm in the city. Much of the produce that is grown in the many parcels that constitute Earthworks Urban Farm and its greenhouse is sold on-site to neighborhood residents or incorporated in the soup kitchen offerings. And they have made an explicit commitment to the community of place represented by the neighborhood that the soup kitchen serves, and use growing food sustainably as to engage their soup kitchen participants, guests as they're called, and also volunteers who come from outside the neighborhood and from corporations about food justice issues in in the community. And here are some other examples. This is Lafayette Greens. This was sponsored by CompuWare, and it's in the middle of downtown, surrounded by, it's a beautiful oasis surrounded by these tall buildings and parking structures, and I invite you to take a look at it when you next come to Detroit, and you must. And here are some examples of neighborhood gardens, including the Warrior Demonstration Garden that Adam works very actively in. And we have now 10 community markets, including the Wayne State Community Market. The collage here, of course, is the Northwest Detroit Farmers Market, another very successful farmers market that offers shuttles to neighborhood seniors around the community. We have other programs. Peaches and Greens is a storefront that also offers a mobile grocery store in the neighborhood. And then about 1,500, give or take, fresh food boxes that are put together and delivered to various community sites by Eastern Market, Gleaners Community Food Bank, and Keep Growing Detroit. And here are some images of the Detroit Food Policy Council in action. The top one is of its annual summit. I didn't mention this, but the Detroit Food Policy Council is the place that provides comprehensive attention to food issues in the city. It was created by City Council resolution, but it's frustrated because elected officials don't take it very seriously. In fact, I think one or two probably don't even know that it exists. And so making that connection to elected officials has been a source of frustration. But it offers an annual summit, which is a very important event that brings together various people who are already working in the food system and newcomers, and provides updates on what's going on in the city. And it's a very important networking opportunity. It puts out an annual report on the food system, and it organized the land use listening session following the Hans sale, and also a voter's guide for the last election. And the lower image is one of those evening meetings that goes on till 8:30 sometimes. Okay, I gave you some very quick highlights of the Detroit food planning scene. There's a lot more to be said, and if another person was a representative from another group was here, they would share a different set of images and stories, but these are some of the more important ones. This is by far my favorite image from Seed Wayne. What an amazing story it says. And I'll let you figure out the elements of the story. But Seed Wayne is a campus community collaborative to build sustainable food systems on Wayne State's campus and in Detroit neighborhoods by linking to the core functions of the university: education, research, engagement, and operations. And student leadership is a key element in the program, both as outcome but also as means. And students do come with leadership skills and experiences. So we have activities on campus, and in the community we have 3 campus gardens, including one with a winter extension, which was a demonstration project, so we didn't do it last year, or I think the year before as well. And the 22-week farmers market, which is a flagship project of Wayne State. I won't read all the cells, you can read them for yourself. But I want to highlight a new program that we created last fall, which is the Seed Wayne Fellowship in Community Food System Planning, that involves the Cities and Food class that provides an overview of food system work in Detroit. It's mostly in class, but has some projects involved. And also an internship in partnership with community organizations that has a stipend associated with it. In the community, we offer the Healthy Eats fairs and workshops. And we offered a corner store program, a healthy corner store program that helped corner stores carry fresh fruits and vegetables. The grant that supported the program ended, but we still maintain connection with the store owners, and a paper that is reporting on the lessons of that project is currently under review, and I'm hoping that that'll come out soon, because that was, I think, an important effort, even though it had many frustrations, especially in neighborhoods that were depopulating even as we were working with the stores. We built a passive solar greenhouse on the east side for agricultural demonstration, season extension, and training for youth and adults in partnership with the Earthworks Urban Farm. So here are some older images of the Warrior Demonstration Garden, and you can see the winter garden in the bottom right, where we were harvesting salad greens that were being offered for Earth Day celebrations. This is another view of the Warrior Garden that was taken by, that's actually independently, autonomously maintained by student groups. First by the student leaders of urban gardens and sustainability, and you can see Kat Krupski. Did you know Kat, Adam? And Jake Grobel on the left side, who is also currently a leader of that. He's an engineering major. Kat's graduated and left the university. And now, of course, we have the Detroit Industrial Gardeners, of whom Adam is a part, that's managing the Warrior Garden. It looks different now as well. I don't have a more recent image. St. Andrew's Garden, which is an allotment garden, and we sign agreements with teams of students. That was built in 2009, has 18 beds that are 4 feet by 8 feet. And we have the parking structure number 5, rooftop garden, that consists of 3 beds that were designed by an engineering student that collect their own rainwater and in barrels that then drip into the beds. And if Michigan gets the rainfall that it's supposed to get in an average season, then the beds shouldn't need any watering. But there is a faucet that's conveniently located nearby in case we need it. And of course, our flagship farmers market that runs from June through October, 22 weeks on Wednesdays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. We have 12 to 14 growers participate any given time. 8 of them are Detroit-based growers or producers. And we sell a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, berries, flowers, potted plants, and baked goods, and also prepared foods. Our lunchtime traffic is very important for the market. Yes?
Did you say something about the origin of the name of the garden, the Warrior Garden?
Yes. Warrior is our team, our sports team, and there's a Warrior Cafe nearby. And so we try to name the gardens based on landmarks that people can identify, and so it became the Warrior Garden. We are warriors for peace. We're not warriors in the warmongering sense. So that's the origin of the name. It's actually quite simple. And so the St. Andrew's Garden is located next to the St. Andrew's Church. That's how it got its name. But thank you for that question. So the farmers market puts between $200,000 and $250,000, that's $250,000 in the hands of local growers and producers each season, which not small potatoes, if you'll pardon the pun, right? And the farmers market accepts SNAP, the bridge card. It also matches SNAP spending with double up food bucks, which essentially for every $20 that a food stamp participant spends at the market, we match it with an additional $20 of double up food bucks that should be spent exclusively on Michigan-grown fruits and vegetables. And because we're a Michigan-only market, essentially any grower can participate in that. And
would you say that again?
The double up food bucks is an incentive program. And it's a matching program. So for every dollar, because it's in $2 denominations, it's for every $2 that a food stamp participant spends at the market, they get an additional $2, up to $20 max each day, to spend exclusively on fruits and vegetables that are grown in the state of Michigan. So they get $20, let's say that someone wants to spend $20 of food stamps, they get $20 worth of wooden tokens, and Slava knows this very well, and then they get $20 additional of double up food bucks. The latter should be spent only on fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's an incentive program that seeks to increase consumption of fruits and vegetables, of course, but it's also puts revenue in the hands of Michigan growers, and it's great for farmers markets because it brings additional customers. So it's a win-win-win kind of a solution. We also accept Project Fresh and Senior Project Fresh, which are farmers market nutrition programs.
Where did you get your funding?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to give a shout out to Rachel Baer. So the Double Up Food Box is a program of the Fair Food Network. And there are similar programs. So it operates in Michigan, all Michigan farmers markets, but also outside of Michigan. And Rachel Baer was a longtime staff member. She defected and came to Kalamazoo, and she's running a very exciting program here that I think some of you may know about. So any other question? They get funding from a variety of foundations, but Wholesome Wave is an important foundation that contributes to this work across the country. You want to say a quick addition, Rachel?
No, just that we do have Double Up Food Box at the farmers markets here in Kalamazoo, thanks to the great work of the People's Food Co-op and management there. And the funding actually for Double Up Food Box in Michigan was mostly private, entirely private foundation dollars until this year when there was a grant program created at USDA. So there's now federal dollars
that's right.
to support those incentives.
I knew that.
It's really exciting.
Yes. Yes. And then we have the Student Advantage Project, where students give us $5 in cash and get $10 in vouchers with which to buy fruits and vegetables. So it's a similar program to Double Up Food Box, except it's for students, and there are a lot of international students who participate in this program. And you see a couple of them showing off their coupon on the right there.
Who funds that?
We fund that from grants that we write. Yeah. Last year we spent $10,000 on Student Advantage. And the usual, nowadays farmers markets are enriched by chefs demonstrations that use Michigan products and conveniently assembled healthy recipes. We do hands-on, engaged conversations about healthy eating. For example, on the lower left, where we say eat the rainbow, right? Fruits and vegetables of different colors. And then we also offer more structured workshops around healthy eating that include taste tests as well, and a variety of other kinds of activities that are more in the sort of entertainment realm. But again, very, very important for the social function that the market serves. We have a variety of fine performing and literary arts at the market, including a fine poet who's part of the Inside Out Youth Poets. And I want to mention the Cities and Food class, which is also offered in partnership with community organizations. Almost on a weekly basis, we have community leaders come to class to talk about an important food theme, whether that's anti-hunger work or school food or farmers market or urban agriculture policy and so on. And you see Dan Carmody, who's the president of Eastern Market, on the top. He just came a few weeks ago to class. The class is going on right now. And then Dwayne Wells from the Gleaners Food Bank in 2013. In terms of our community projects, that's on the top left is the greenhouse that we built, the nearly 4,000 square foot greenhouse that we built at St. Paul and Meldrum on the east side in collaboration with the Earthworks Urban Farm, which is a very important site for production, as it turns out, but also demonstration of season extension and agricultural entrepreneurship training. At the bottom right is the Coners Party Store that was among our first store to enter in the Detroit Fresh program, where we essentially work with stores to help them carry more fresh fruits and vegetables. As you can see, this gentleman who's the store owner emptied out 2 shelves, a tiny, tiny store. You could barely fit 4 people in the store. We're very proud of his baskets of vegetables and fruits. Unfortunately, it closed not too long ago because of health issues, his health issues, in fact. But we have other stores that are continuing this program to a greater or lesser extent. We did check-ins on a monthly basis, and that kept people, with the program, and we did problem solving. And we gave them supplies, and we connected them to a wholesale, produce wholesaler that delivered if they were ordering more than $75 or more. This is another store that actually was a grocery store that had to downsize because the surrounding neighborhood lost population. And an amazing store. People will talk fondly about the store. And the owners, they're long-term participants. They know residents by their name. They'll call them, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith, and I want to also point out that we try to create synergies by connecting different parts of our activities. And so, because this is such an amazing store and well liked by the neighborhood, when Arts Core Detroit came to us to ask for project ideas, we suggested that they work with the A&W store, and so they've involved neighborhood youth to create a mural on this store wall. And so when we did Detroit Fresh and we worked with the stores, we realized that we also needed to do outreach in the community to let people know what was offered and to help the stores figure out what the community members needed. So we started offering these fairs in partnership with the stores, and we had cooking demonstrations and engaged people in conversations about what the challenges they faced in terms of eating healthy food and what they needed to do to move to a healthier diet, and got amazing feedback. We also support a lot of peer teaching and learning by students. So, for example, on the top left, you see a vertical garden that Anita Vasudevan is building based on examples she saw when she visited Africa. A rain barrel construction workshop that 2 students offered on campus. On the bottom left is Tanya Troy offering a nutrition workshop for seniors, again also with taste tests and samples. And then Tanya and another colleague from the Public Health Student Organization at the Healthy Food Fair at Harding Market. We have Tyler, we engaged in a partnership with the Wayne State Student Urban Planners to build a community garden. They built the garden, we supported them, at Hazel Park, which is a community outside of Detroit. And then also partnership with the Public Health Student Organization that essentially it offers workshops to a variety of groups on healthy eating and community nutrition. We do other kinds of educational activities, so farm tours are an important part of our work. We didn't do one last year, but we visit various growing and food production sites. In this case, in 2012, we had a good diversity, which is why you have images from that year here. An apiary, an orchard, a flour mill, and also Harvesting the Earth, which is a program in Flint, Michigan. We offer the quarterly newsletter that provides updates on our activities, and the entire archive is available on our website that you can Google, that you can obtain by Googling Seed Wayne. We're late on this month's newsletter because I wanted to incorporate this visit to Western Michigan in the newsletter. So Google our archive in the next week to 10 days and you'll find mention of Western Michigan visit. And then through research and data analysis, we also prepared this report for the Detroit Food Policy Council. That's also available on the website. So with Seed Wayne, we're creating a community of practice around food sustainability in these ways. I should mention that Seed Wayne's activities were shaped in considerable part by its first student employee, William Agee, who's now studying law at Harvard. Many students start off as volunteers and then lead activities with more or less autonomy, as for example in the case of the Warrior Garden and the St. Andrew's Garden. I almost never step into the garden unless I need to take some pictures of the progress of the season. We really check in on a weekly basis. They get the resources that they need and they go off and do the work. With Warrior Garden, really it's a partnership in the student organization. So the autonomy, the amount of autonomy students, leaders get depends on the nature of the activities. Of course, some activities are more forgiving, like the garden, and others are more demanding of more formal accountability, such as when, for example, when contracts are involved with the farmers market, or there's a federal program involved, like such as with SNAP. So the activities are more structured than. We have a relatively flat hierarchy, so that I know most of the actively participating students. And word of mouth is our best recruiting tool. An important part of leadership is managing transitions, because students have this very irritating habit of graduating and leaving. you know, I mean, of course, as a faculty member, I want that to happen, but as someone who leads a program, you know, managing the transition is very important. And in 8 years, we've maybe had 1 or 2 glitches where some of that transition didn't work very smoothly, but that is a leadership task. And we offer many convenient avenues for people to collaborate and contribute, and these are by necessity boundary spanning. In other words, they are interdisciplinary, given the variety of activities related to growing and food retail and composting and nutrition education. They involve spanning academic and non-academic functions, because we work with facilities and police and business operations. They span campus and community boundaries as well. Almost in every activity we do, we have community partners. For example, the fiduciary for our SNAP program is Eastern Market. And so students, staff, and volunteers contribute at different levels. You know, if someone is a Facebook maven and they'll put a post on Facebook and that gets a lot of people to the farmers market. We have faculty and staff who will bring lunches for volunteers at the farmers market. And yet others will open the door to a very important policy decision because of their connection with the university president. And, you know, and those are all very important to us. And we try to maintain a balance between formal and informal contributions. We collect a lot of data and stories on a regular basis, and we reflect on that on a weekly basis for our activities during the season, and on a seasonal basis for the entire program. What we're able to do, what our particular strengths are, how to explain successes and failures in any given activity, in any given season, and what we're constrained from doing is something that sees a lot of conversation. We are conscious of the need to maintain diversity in our staffing, and so we actively recruit students of color. But the student, you know, sometimes that is a challenge, and students of color are in great demand for other activities as well. In some years we luck out, but we are also conscious that we intentionally exclude some activities that are very important to food justice work. For example, we don't take up food worker justice issues on campus, and because these are more complicated, and we cannot afford to take an oppositional stance with the university, even as we seek its support and cooperation on other fronts. And so we support food worker justice outside by working with, for example, Restaurant Opportunities Michigan, that tries to organize restaurant workers. We also try to be very mindful of how to incorporate new activities and what to take on. We turned down a $50,000 grant, for example, because it didn't fit with what we were doing or form an extension to what we were doing. And you know, that was a critical decision and a painful decision, but we did that. And because our activities cannot be sustained completely by the revenues that we earn at a farmer's market, we've developed a reserve fund that is now at $80,000 that hopefully will grow to $100,000 at the end of this year, so that we're not always chasing after grants. Because no funder will fund a university. Very few funders will fund a university program because they say the university should support it. And B, funding operational expenses is especially important. So we are deliberately small in scale, and we try to think about how we should grow and what direction. And recognition. We take time to express gratitude and recognize contributions and celebrate our collective accomplishments. But last but not least, and going back to the theme of this lecture, it's the contextualization in the here and now of these big ideas of sustainable food systems is what connects us to the local and national food movement. You know, all of the points above that could be applicable to any other issue. And it can be challenging. This contextualization can be challenging, and sometimes it's contradictory. So, for example, the definition of sustainability varies depending on the specific activity that we take up. So for example, in campus gardening, we are very stringent, it's about local, it's about building capacity of, in terms of growing, it's about building soil and organic growing practices. So it encompasses a broader array of topics, whereas in Healthy Eats, it's about fresh and healthy. We don't talk about the other things because in that context, fresh and healthy is the most important definition of sustainability. And also, I should say, it's challenging from the perspective of what it means for the university, what our work means for the university as a whole, and the university's adoption of sustainability as a goal. So, for example, Seedwain is accommodated in the university without very much engagement, essentially by or from the institution. So that brings up the point: is accommodation its recognition of sustainability? It's not a very satisfying way to incorporate sustainability in the institution. So the question of what, if anything, has changed in the university as a result of our work is a question that keeps coming up in our conversations. Still, to go out also with this key thesis, let me highlight how community is forged through Seedwain around this big idea of sustainable food systems, which is typically defined as related to the ecology, the economy, and equity, and we've thrown in democracy and engagement. And if you will permit me a little show and tell pride, we translate this big idea in the following ways. The small actions that build sustainable food systems, that increase access to fresh and healthy food in a variety of ways, that bring producers and eaters closer, that build capacity for sustainable and just food, that help build capacity for sustainable and just food, I should say. Again, through a variety of different activities, whether that's growing or cooking in healthful ways, incorporating seasonal produce, or cultivating business capacity or policy capacity, and then advancing multiple community goals, whether those are goals in nutrition and public health, economic vitality, neighborhood vitality, ecological health, social justice, and democratic decision making. And I'm going to stop there. What is the community that feeds you?
Dr. Pothukuchi will get questions, I believe. You want to, just begin?
Yes.
Is it the parking structure rooftop garage? Is that the one on Cass Avenue by the freeway?
No, it's parking structure 5. And if you Google campus map and parking structure 5, you will see the 3 beds.
Okay.
In the satellite map.
How did you get into this?
How did I get into this? So I'm an architect by training, architect and planner by training, and got a PhD in urban planning, very interested in community development and community organizing, especially in immigrant communities. And my first teaching gig after I graduated with my PhD from Michigan was at University of Wisconsin-Madison on a visiting position. And I came in contact with Professor Jerry Kaufman, who was asked to teach a course on urban food systems through a Kellogg grant from the College of Agriculture. And so he one day drapes himself on my door and says, "Carly, what do you need? What do you know about food?" And recent PhD, plenty of hubris. I said, "Quite a bit." I had taken one course on international food systems, and I was in, and it was an amazing learning experience. We were maybe just a week ahead of the students. We had many community partners. We did, it was a capstone course. Some students were like, what kind of job is it going to get me? But many students, dove right in and engaged with the topic, and a couple of papers came out of that made the case for incorporating food issues systematically, food system issues into planning, just as we do transportation and housing and economic development and think about land systematically, we should be thinking about food systematically. And that was an important paper in the development of the food system planning field, and it, in some respect, made my career. Oh, should I use this?
It might be better.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it looks like a fantastic program, what you've been working on, others have been working on. It's almost humbling, if I hear that correctly, or daunting, what's going on in Detroit. The amount of vacant parcels, the poverty level, the health level of people there. I mean, we hear about these things going on in other parts of the world, but forget that it's right next door. It's, I'm from Detroit. That's why my dad's in Detroit.
East side or west side?
7 Mile, Livernois originally.
So, west side.
And my mom actually, I used to have a gallery in the Fisher Building.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I know that area pretty well.
Okay, so sure.
Yeah. But it's almost like, is there, for people to farm and start raising food in Detroit, there almost would need to be a bailout of sorts that pays people in Detroit that are unemployed to work and raise food in Detroit for the community, for a greater community around that area. Is there anything like that where there's people talking about a large cash infusion to hire people to grow food in Detroit?
Not the scale you're imagining, but there's an organization called SHAR, Self-Help Resources, Self-Help Addiction Resources, that's obtained, I want to say scores of acres from the city of Detroit to employ people who are with addiction issues in growing food. And so it's a jobs and economic development and social service model. Not everyone wants to grow food. I mean, there's a reason we have moved out of agriculture as a society. We have 1% of the population feeding us, right? Agriculture is hard work, but having a community that is supportive makes a huge difference for how agriculture is done in cities. And so there is a lot more work that needs to be done to cultivate that capacity, cultivate interest, generate jobs that are, that actually pay a decent wage. And then, we need to reimagine what it means to be a consumer, right? Our food is so cheap that when you go to a farmer's market and learn the story of how it's grown, and there are still people who then scowl when they see a bag of salad like this big and, for $5, when they wouldn't do that at Whole Foods. Right, so, there really is some challenging questions around how do you make that happen, but there are lots of very interesting discussions and ideas that are being, that are part of this reimagining that are happening in Detroit. Well,
Should I do this?
oh, okay. And I will protect.
I am also from Detroit. I'm from the west side, downriver. I went to Wayne State, and it was a nice education and everything, but nobody, at least during my time, and I suspect even now, would stick around. We'd go to school, go to work, go home and study. That's it. And you have accomplished something magnificent, and I saw this a few years ago. Now it's even more developed, where you've got students hanging hanging around doing things.
So when you
it's
say
to your
you,
credit.
now you say you mean Wayne State University.
Well, I mean, your program, Seed Wayne, and with your leadership has developed something incredible and unbelievable to an alum like me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment, but truly people are sticking around now because Wayne State is engaged in a lot of placemaking work in collaboration with the medical campus south of us, and also the Henry Ford Health campus north of us, and also the institutions nearby. And there's a lot of growth in Midtown, and Midtown has become a vibrant district, and students are sticking around. There are also now, residence halls on campus that weren't there when you probably went to school. So we are a commuter campus, and that is still the case, but there are a lot more people sticking around, and I would like to think it's because of Seed Wayne, but it's not true.
Who am I shaking this?
Thank you very much. Could you comment a little more fully on the first of your 4 essential E's? Ecologically regenerative. To what extent is that a kind of overriding or underlying consideration in all your work with food and community systems?
Yeah, you had to ask me a difficult question. The primary way, and again, I'm trying to translate these big ideas into concrete actions that we take up, and in the conversations that happen in the garden and in the classroom, and also in conjunction with the broader sustainability efforts on campus. And the concrete ways are essentially in the building of soil and the stewarding of soil, and the importance of soil for food and agriculture, and the work that we do in the community around that, and the composting that we do on campus, but it's not, I should say, it's not at the level that we would like to see. And in fact, we bring compost from the outside for our gardens. In the classroom, the discussion is broader. We talk about climate change. We talk about industrial ag, especially animal factories, and the impact on communities, water. We of course talk about soil. We talk about bees and pollinators. So it's much broader in the classroom than it is really in practice. I mean, we talk about pollinators in the garden, and we grow flowers. And we started a beekeeping operation on campus, but when facilities found out, they essentially nixed it. And now we're in a bit of a transition. Maybe I shouldn't say this aloud. So we're in a bit of a transition in terms of our facilities, the top guy. And so a dean approached, the dean of the College of Fine Performing and Communication Arts approached me. And at that point, I didn't know that the facilities guy was retiring and leaving. So, we now have a little bit of a space to just insert it, and then, then it'll be fait accompli when the new guy or gal comes in. And so that's the little bit of a subterfuge that's going on in our garden these days. We'll get you.
I had a question about what you call transition management.
Yeah.
I've been on a number of campuses, and this has always been a problem, especially, students have their lives, and especially over the summertime when you really need them for gardening and those kinds of things. So I'm wondering if you have some tips or some suggestions, or how you can continue a program even when the students aren't necessarily there.
Yeah. So there are two issues. One is transition management, from season to season, and the other is over the course of the season. There are, and we run into this because the academic calendar doesn't map nicely into the season calendar. So maybe Adam can be given the mic and he can talk about how he's transitioning into leadership position at St. Andrews. Hope Morrow, who was an occupational therapy student, managed the garden for I think it was 2 years, and now Adam is taking over. So Adam, you want to stand up maybe?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just kind of learning as I go. It's just as challenging as you would think it is. I mean, I don't think there's any secret. It's kind of just right place, right time, hoping that someone will take responsibility.
But in terms of the specific conversation around transition, Hope essentially, Adam is going to take over this season, 2016, but over several weeks in 2015, Hope walked you through the process. Go ahead, talk about it.
Yeah, trying to identify someone early in the season that'll take over the following season. And that's the role that the current leader has to think about, probably starting as soon as the garden is up and running. We have a list of responsibilities, things that need to get done prior to the beginning of the season, the end of the season. So it's transferring that knowledge and learning from the lessons of the previous season, adding to that. So. And
you also actually participated in the garden last season.
Yes.
And we had you initial a document.
Basically a contract of what I need to do and all the responsibilities. So making sure to identify someone early in the season and kind of, let them know, hope the previous garden leader, kind of let me know she's leaving and approach me, do you want to take over? And, I said yes, I'm interested in it, and she prepped me on all the responsibilities. So it was pretty, this is a pragmatic approach that
but it requires forethought and planning, and right. The students have to be thinking about it, and students haven't lived long enough to be doing a lot of planning, and so it's not their fault. But in terms of continuing over the season, that is a challenge for us. And that's why we refuse to sign leases with individuals. We ask people to come together as groups of 4, 3 or 4 people. If they're reliable, we'll take 2, especially if they live nearby and commit to being over the season. And sometimes even that doesn't work. We have beds that will, be ignored for several weeks. And what's the worst part is when the harvests are coming in fast and thick is when school starts back up. And that's when the harvests start to walk away. And they walk away not just from the beds of the people who are absent, but also from the people who are active but were waiting for this tomato to ripen to the exact shade of red. And that is frustrating because all this work that students put, and sometimes the walking away is innocent. A family is taking a walk and they say, oh, ripe tomato, nobody seems to want it. And it goes, and sometimes it's a little more malicious. But and so we send emails and say, hey, and sometimes the emails and the phone calls are personalized. Such and such group, make sure you harvest because otherwise it puts all of us at risk. And so it's an ongoing challenge, and I don't know that we have any tips or answers, but we do our best.
You can get tomatoes that are ripe when they're green and deceive people.
And there are some really delicious tomatoes, right? Yeah, no, see? That's a tip. Can we see someone else?
Sure.
Yeah.
So my question is, you showed a bunch of pictures of community stores, smaller stores that stock your fruits and veggies, but is the new Whole Foods stocking the community gardens fruits?
No. It's not because they don't necessarily want to. They have a very stringent GAP, certification process, where generally accepted practice certification that small growers find it hard to get by themselves. So Whole Foods is stocking a lot of prepared foods though from Michigan producers. The fresh produce is a little trickier from local growers.
Hi.
Hi.
So you talked a bit about diversity and inclusion, and I was just wondering, as a professor that runs this sort of student-run organization, sustainability can be a bit polarizing and marginalizing to minorities and other racial groups, and I was just wondering, as far as recruitment goes, do you find challenges in that with like recruiting students of color? And what are some ways that you try and be more inclusive and engaged in those marginalized populations on campus?
Yeah. Very good questions. So there's several points here that I want to make. One is, even though sustainability intrinsically has this notion of equity in its definition, and that's what we mean when we say sustainability, because justice is important, we say sustainable and just. We add that additional category. In terms of ensuring participation by students of color, we try to be as reflective as possible and do make an effort. So, for example, we try to hire volunteers. In a particular activity, if someone actually has given time free, and if they're available to actually work for pay, then we want to hire them because they've shown their commitment, they know the work, they know the people. But sometimes we go out of that practice and we hire from the outside. It creates its own challenges because the group is tight-knit, because they know each other, and then suddenly someone comes in from the outside and then reports for duty and does their work. And so we try to mitigate those separations through other means, potlucks, and we bring lunch to the farmers market and try to engage people in conversations. But I don't know that but I should say we have great students of color who participate and lead. Tanya Troy, an amazing student who graduated from the public health program and now is at Johns Hopkins in a research associate position. We do get students of color both in a volunteer capacity who then move on to staff positions, and sometimes we're lucky when that happens, and sometimes we try very hard and it doesn't happen for a variety of reasons. So the clock is ticking, and sometimes you just have to hire someone because you're starting a market, and then, but I don't know that we have any kind of resolution to this issue. It's something we work on every season.
Perhaps, given the comment the clock is ticking, I know it's the time is we're probably close to the ending time. Although we can certainly stick around if there are others who have questions. Maybe one more question, possibly, and then stick around if you have.
In the city of Detroit, there are a lot of neighborhoods where homes were torn down and so the land is vacant. Are those empty lots being used much for farming or for growing just a garden?
There are lots in neighborhoods that are used for farming. Some are squatters, some gardeners are squatters. They find a vacant lot nearby, they start gardening, and the city has so much vacant land, if no one complains, then that's what continues. The Detroit Land Bank Authority has developed programs now to start disposing of land. So they have a side lot program, but they don't keep track of what the side lot is used for. So for $100, there's a contract. You can actually go to their website, and it's actually a pretty simple form, and buy a side lot and garden there. It's sometimes used for other things, parking and play for kids and so on. There's also another program called the Community Partner Program, where a nonprofit organization that's a recognized community partner can buy land and then allow you to garden, and many gardeners, some gardeners have taken advantage of that. There's so much vacant land though, and so we're now in conversation with the Detroit Land Bank Authority to see what can happen. You know, you have the side lot and you have the community partner, but there are other arrangements that, you know, that growing arrangements that kind of fall through the cracks. And right now, if you're a for-profit farm, and what does for-profit mean? I mean, if you're a market gardener, it's very hard to obtain property from the Detroit Land Bank. So there's still, the Land Bank Authority is listening to grower frustrations, but they don't really have a lot of authority to create different policies. So they have to keep going back to the Planning and Development Department and the Mayor's office. And these decisions are being made on, very frustratingly, made on a case-by-case basis because there's no master plan. There's not a plan that says, oh, yeah, good for urban agriculture and not so good, you know, because this is a hot neighborhood for development. But that's why this reimagining of neighborhoods that especially Keep Growing Detroit is leading is very important. Because what they're saying is, don't think of urban ag here and development here. Think about a garden in every neighborhood, right? And that garden can take different forms and shapes depending on the type of neighborhood. If it's very dense, then maybe the garden looks, you know, maybe these are smaller gardens, they look different. And if it's, you know, designated as, you know, if it's less dense, then maybe there are farms and so on that could be developed. And that's important. We need to keep pushing that point because this either-or conception doesn't work. Doesn't work for neighborhoods, doesn't work for growers.
Thank you very much. And please stay if you have follow-up questions or want to take part in the ongoing conversation.
There's table in the
Pardon?
The tables are
There are tables in the back as well. And join me in thanking